I do an Xbox podcast every week. It's called the X1 Bros. Go check it out if you haven't listened to it. YouTube.com/X1 Bros. But on it this week, we discussed, because all of us are playing Baldur's Gate and we're all playing it on PC, and we discussed how awesome it would be to play this on the Xbox. Primarily because the controller, these types of games just fit a controller so well. And so then the discussion was had, okay, well, we don't know when this game is coming out yet. There are some rumors suggesting that it may not come out until 2024 on Xbox. Meanwhile, PlayStation gets it in September. I think Microsoft has to do everything that they can to make it come out as soon as possible. Whatever that date is, maybe it's after September. It can't be 2024 in my mind. Not that it can't be, but I just feel like you give credence to criticism about the parity situation that Xbox currently finds itself in. And I asked, these are Xbox guys, my cousin and my brother who are on the podcast with me. Hey, guys, what do you think? Does this make you mad? Yeah, it should be on Xbox. We're missing out on this. And this seems to be the talking point that has come up. And I actually don't think it's an incorrect talking point. I understand why parity exists between the Xbox Series X and Series S. You don't want to be in a situation where all of a sudden, and I said this on the podcast, all of a sudden, okay, I can play this game this way on the Xbox Series X, but I can only play it this way on the Series S. You have to have parity between games. The question is, what is Microsoft going to do going forward, and Xbox going to do going forward to avoid this situation in the future? And that it's a real question. It's a general question. And I think this article from Paul Tassi over at Forbes actually illustrates why it's so important to them. And the headline is Microsoft's Xbox Series S parity demands are now handing Sony free wins. His point here in this article is basically that Sony, for all intents and purposes, gets a console exclusive game here, at least for a while, until Microsoft is able to drop this because of its parity feature. Now, Paul Tassi agrees with me and admits that yes, parity has to exist. The way that it's set up, you can't have these differences. So the question is, what does Xbox do going forward, particularly as games become more complicated, as games really try to push the envelope with technology? Paul Tassi even addresses that here in this article. And I don't know. It is a tricky question. I do think it is good that the Xbox Series S has these entry points. Or the Xbox rather has these entry points between the Xbox Series S and the Series X. I do think it's good that parity has to exist in games between them. Now, the tricky part. What does Xbox do to ensure that, at the very least, any games dropping on the PlayStation also drop on the Xbox with the same features between the Series X and Series S? Does that mean... I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. Does that mean having a team on the back end of Microsoft work very closely with major titles and making sure that happens? I don't know. It is a weakness, though. It is a weakness of that model, and it will be interesting to see what Xbox does going forward. Let's read through this together. Let's discuss it. Let's talk about. Let me know what you guys think, though, before we jump into this. Initial knee-jerk, what would you do? What do you think Xbox needs to do? Are you maybe for them just getting rid of the entire parity between Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X? Now, I don't want to overstate the case here and act like it's the sky is falling, because there are some news articles doing that. Check this one out, by the way. I just wanted to pull this up so we could laugh at it together. Let's laugh at this one together. Oh, you can't even see. They don't even format their website correctly. Xbox. This is the headline. Xbox fans beg for end to Series S parity after missing out on massive RPG. Are they though? Are they? Anyways, they just can't help but take a shot. But Xbox has got to avoid that in the future. How do they do that? I don't know. So let's read through this. Let's start in paragraph. Let's just start from the beginning. At the start of this console generation, Paul Tassi says Microsoft made a surprising decision. Rather than split its consoles between disc and digital only like Sony, it actually split them between power level. The Xbox Series S was cheaper but lacked the horsepower of the more expensive Series X. It was meant to be a bridge between generations and a lower cost entry point, but Microsoft made an important promise. While there would be some variance in technical capabilities between the consoles, feature parity between the two would remain the same. It would remain the same because Microsoft would demand it remain the same from both its own studios and third parties. And again, I don't think that's incorrect. I think you need to be simple. All of the apps, all the games have the same features on the Series X as they do the Series S. You don't want to get into a situation where there are lists and you have to have knowledge of what features exist on which console. You can't do that. I also think it's correct from a strategic standpoint for onboarding new players. Most if you're going after, you have your hardcore gamers are not mass market necessarily. Your casual gamers are. A casual gamer is much more likely to pay for a cheaper Xbox Series S, not to mention it has massive sex appeal, but the cheaper Xbox Series S than they are to go all in on a hardcore gaming machine like the Xbox Series X, which I think is the correct strategy to bring gaming to the masses. We just got to solve this problem, which at the beginning of a console generation does not necessarily exist. And in fairness, this is the first real example of this, and it's really apparent because this is a fantastic game of the year probably, or at least on a lot of people's shortlist for game of the year already. However, over time, Paul Tassi continues, that has become harder and harder to satisfy. Some developers have grumbled about the Series S requirements for a while, but now we have a prime example of this parity demand actively hurting the Xbox ecosystem and its own players. Larian has delayed the release of Baldur's Gate 3, currently on pace to possibly be 2023's Game of the Year until they can figure out how to make split screen work on the Series S. Okay, now here's my initial reaction to that. Why not just remove split screen altogether? How many players are actually going to utilize split screen in a game like Baldur's Gate? I'm sure the percentage is incredibly low. I'm sure it's under 10%. I bet you it's under 5%. I bet you it's under 1%. It maybe even be less than that and be under 1%. Having said that, let's pretend that Xbox just does that. Say, hey, just no split screen on either the Series X or the Series S. That way you maintain parity. That may seem like a simple solution. However, then you got to think, how does Sony weaponize that against you? Well, guess what? On Sony, on the PlayStation, you get all the features. So you really are stuck between a rock and a hard place here, and where you can't just do a simple selection like that, right? Or a simple solution like that, rather. Indeed, it is on the series, or it is on the Steam Deck. The game is available on the Steam Deck, and so a lot of players, even on Twitter, have been tweeting out like, "This is on the Steam Deck and you can't play on the Series S." Split screen is not on the Steam Deck because it can't happen on the Steam Deck. It doesn't have the power. It doesn't have the capabilities, and they just removed it as a result. So it's a tricky situation, no doubt. Let's continue here. Michael Dowse, director of publishing, made the problem very plain. We've said many times in the past that the issue is getting split screen working on the Series S, which is taking more time, but is in progress. This is a huge technical hurdle, he says, but we are unable to release the game on the ecosystem without this feature. We cannot remove the split screen feature because we are obliged to launch with feature parity, and so continue to try to and make it work. We have quite a few engineers working very hard to do what no other RPG of this scale has achieved: seamless drop-in, drop-out co-op on the Series S. We hope to have an update by the end of the year. That's where the 2024 is coming in. And yeah, I appreciate his honesty and candidness there. Again, it's a rock and a hard place. Let's continue. Microsoft demand for feature parity between the Series X, Paul Tassi says, and Series S quite literally means that Xbox players may not be able to play 2023's possible game of the year. Yep, we know that. You can say, and here's the point. You can say, okay, well, Microsoft just needs to end the feature parity demand between the X and the S. In this case, Microsoft could give the okay to cut split screen and the game could release. And yet, you can see how Microsoft has sort of trapped itself. I agree with this 1,000%. For Baldur's Gate 3, that means split screen, and Xbox owners who are not following video games news every second of the day might find themselves buying a Series S version thinking they can play co-op with their friend on a split screen, and they cannot. You just can't. You've made the commitment. You have to follow through with this commitment. And you don't ever want to be in that situation where you overcomplicate hardware purchases. This is Microsoft. He continues, not really thinking through the concept of the Series S from the start. I don't know that that's the case. It definitely is a hurdle that perhaps was not considered. The feature parity demand actually does seem necessary. Agree 1,000%. But the further we get into this generation, the more modern games are pushing the technical envelope, and the more the Series S is straining to keep up, and developers are straining to meet Microsoft's demands. Maybe it's a more regular cycle that you phase out that bottom console, right? So the new bottom console, I don't know. It's difficult. As we see in this example, Microsoft has essentially handed PlayStation a console exclusive, and this, I think, is the best point that I've seen yet, and best said and stated point. As we can see in this example, Microsoft has essentially handed PlayStation a console exclusive for one of the biggest games of the year, without Sony even needing to make any kind of a deal. And that's a disaster. And that is where the rub is. And that is where you're just at a competitive disadvantage because of this feature set. There are a lot of smart people at Xbox. There are a lot of smart engineers. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious, right? And also water is wet. But I'd be curious to see what solution they come up with going forward here. Is it just the case that maybe there just needs to be a little bit closer relationship between developers and Microsoft to avoid this in the future so that Microsoft engineers can help out where needed? Then does that become a resource issue? How expensive is that? How realistic is that? Can you scale that? Do you even need to scale that? I don't know. What is the plan going forward here? But it definitely does need to be addressed and thought about. And so it will be interesting to see what happens. We cannot have a situation where another game this wouldn't happen that often, but going forward, it may happen more frequently if this doesn't get resolved. Especially as we get deeper into a console generation and technology, developers figure out how to get the most out of consoles. It's going to be interesting. Any ideas, guys? Any solutions? What would you do? What do you think Xbox needs to do? Any developers out there? Let me know. Let me know in the comments below what you think. I do think it is interesting conversation. Again, I think they're all in on the Xbox Series X and S, and I think they need to be. I don't think that that's wrong. I think that's correct. I think having parity is correct as well. The question now is, what is the solution? If there is no solution, maybe you do need to go away from it. But I don't know that there is no solution here. Again, maybe it's a little more hand holding in the future than Xbox is used to doing or something. I don't know. I'm not a developer. Xbox engineers probably looking at this and laughing, but it'll be interesting to see regardless what they decide to do here. Let's read some of the comments. Orlarian could also cut the feature from the Series X version. Nope. I don't think that's you can't do that because then you immediately hand another win to Sony there. The issue isn't feature parity, says DB. It's that there's also launch parity. Otherwise, the X version could simply release now while only S owners wait. I think you have the same. I don't think you could do that either because I think you have the same issue there. Why? It's a next gen. You've sold this as the Series S and X are next generation family. Now you're launching at different times. I think presents the same issue as feature parity. I don't think you can get rid of launch parity either. You're having the same situation there. It makes more sense. Like for instance, Hogwarts didn't come out on past consoles till much later. That is fathomable. It happened to both Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. You cannot have it happen between the X and S. I think you're stuck on launch parity as well. Josh says, why don't they cut the split screen from X and S, launch it now, then introduce it in a patch if they get it working? So that is one thing you can do. You could say, hey, patch in split screen. That might be the solution here. But again, I don't know. That's a short-term solution for this specific instance. You're still giving a win slightly to PlayStation. Maybe that's the answer. There is no good solution right now. Maybe that's the answer. You need to do something like this. Just drop it right away so that everyone can play it. Because let's be honest, how many people are playing split screen? And I would be aggressive about that, by the way. If that would be a decision, I would come out and say like less than 1% of people play split screen or whatever that number is, and make this huge marketing push. Although then again, you don't want to bring more media attention to it necessarily. I don't know. Maybe that's the solution, which is not a good solution, but it is a solution. The ultimate question is what happens going forward. Something needs to happen. Something needs to change. Something needs to. You don't want to be in this situation ever again. For sure. Again, I'd love to know what you guys think. Let's end it there for today's video. If you haven't yet, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. My name is X1 the Gamer. We do Xbox videos all the time right here. And I'll see you guys next time.